if you want to give tenants predictability, Representative Alvarado, you've just done that. You have given every tenant in this state the predictability that their rents will go up 7% like clockwork every single year. This segment is brought to you by Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. Some patients like me can lose 20 to 30 pounds in a month or two. Schedule your free 15-minute consultation today at eastsideweightlossclinic.com. Just because a bill missed a cutoff or seemingly died in Olympia doesn't mean that it can't be resurrected if the party in power wants to find a creative way to do that. One of those is the rent control bill. Democrats say it's not rent control, it's rent control. It is a bill that would control rent. It's rent control. You might recall that it failed in a Senate committee because one Democrat said she just could not make up her mind on it, essentially. And so the thought is that that bill died because if you don't have a clear path in the Senate, I mean, you can pass it up and down and left and right in the House. You could have a unanimous vote in the House, but if it's going to fail in the Senate, what's the point? Well, the House didn't care because yesterday it voted on this, and basically along party lines, the House passed the rent control bill. So a little details on it. This from the Olympian. Washington State House lawmakers vote to regulate rent increases. House Bill 2114 would limit rent increases to 7% for tenants in a 12-month period. Additionally, landlords would not be able to raise the rent within the first year of tenancy. And then a little indication as to why this found new life. It says a Senate version of the bill died in executive session after State Senator Annette Cleveland, a Democrat from Vancouver, voted against the measure. That vote prompted multiple organizations representing Black, Indigenous, and other people of color to send the lawmaker a scathing letter for voting against the interests of her constituents. So it sounds like Democrats were maybe guilted into trying to give this thing another go. In addition to limiting rent increases to 7% in any given year, it would also require longer notification periods before a rent increase. It would also cap certain late fees. So it's no surprise that there is a lot of controversy around this. I mean, we have seen what some of the protections for renters in Seattle and now Tacoma are doing, especially at a time when we're to believe that we're in an affordable housing crisis, and that if we weren't, we wouldn't have a homeless crisis, et cetera, et cetera. All these things are being done that make it so that there is less available affordable housing in Washington state. So they're saying one thing, but all their policies, all their actions are leading to a completely different result. And certainly if you pass rent control statewide, you really think that that's going to do anything to help with the availability of affordable housing? No, small landlords are going to sell that. They're going to sell it. With sellwithwest.com, obviously. So does that count as the commercial for today? So let's get to some of the pro and con arguments that were heard on the House floor. What was interesting is there's multiple cutoffs and deadlines throughout the legislative session. There was one coming up at 5 p.m. yesterday, and they jumped on this thing right before and started the floor debate before that deadline happened, which allowed it to continue. And so there was a lengthy floor debate on it. A couple amendments were heard. Representative Emily Alvarado, who's a Democrat, who also is the one who tried to water down the Holocaust education bill, so just to give you a sense of sort of the ideology there, this is her brainchild, and she testified in support of it.
Across Washington, in rural and suburban and urban communities, people are getting crushed by rising rents. Rents are going up faster than wages. Seniors see rents going up faster than Social Security. Families are making impossible choices while paying more and more to landlords. A record number of Washingtonians is spending more than half of their income on rent. The data is clear. Excessive rent increases causes displacement, particularly of communities of color. Excessive rent increases is a driving factor in evictions that disproportionately hurts young children. Excessive rent increases is a driving force of homelessness, including the growing number of seniors who are forced onto our streets. Unreasonable rent increases threatens the fabric and well-being of our communities. The situation is dire, but the solution is clear. Create basic fairness for renters and manufactured homeowners in Washington. Prevent excessive rent increases. Make it possible so that when people pay their rent on time each month, they know how high the rent will go and they can plan and budget. I've heard from critics who say we shouldn't intervene in the private market. They say to wait for there to be enough housing supply sometime, someday, some year, but seniors cannot wait. Our children cannot wait for housing stability. Working people can't wait one more paycheck. They deserve fairness and predictability and stability in their housing costs now.
Fairness, predictability, stability is what she says this is about. But obviously, there are people who say it does the exact opposite. Representative Andrew Barkis, who is obviously not only a state representative, a Republican, he's also a landlord, and he spoke out against the rent control proposal.
Madam Speaker, I heard tonight two words: fairness and predictability. Madam Speaker, I can't help but think, are those only applicable to one side of the equation? Fairness and predictability? See, Madam Speaker, I believe they are. Madam Speaker, a couple days I'll celebrate 8 years in this institution. It's hard to believe. In the last 5 years, Madam Speaker, there have been 46 pieces of legislation introduced to this body dealing with tenant protections. 46. Of that, 15 were passed into law. Another 8 introduced this year. The policy in front of us tonight is the wrong policy for Washington State, I believe. We have other solutions, Madam Speaker. We had an off-ramp and an amendment, didn't take it. There were a lot of other amendments that were proposed, they went away. Collaboration is the key. That hasn't happened. We have a policy that is going to affect the marketplace. We can debate data, we can read studies, it's all over the place, Madam Speaker. True relief happens when we get relief immediately to the people who most need it. It's called a market, Madam Speaker. And you know, Madam Speaker, I know a little bit about it. I've been doing it for 30 years. I have housed thousands and thousands of people. I have seen markets when rents were high, markets when they were low. We've heard where we're at today. Madam Speaker, I'm afraid for what this policy is going to do to the marketplace in Washington State. I want to help those who need help today. The stories that we have heard, all of us have heard. I see it daily in my real job. We have other opportunities, Madam Speaker. Unfortunately, as you and I both know, we have not addressed those. We have not brought those forward. If it was a priority, we would, Madam Speaker. I believe there are other things that we can do. Fairness and predictability.
You have 20 seconds remaining.
Fairness and predictability. Remember, Madam Speaker, you cannot have a tenant without a housing provider. Please vote no on this, because if we don't and it moves forward, you won't have either.
Yeah. So I'm obviously opposed to the rent control proposal. I've been opposed to a lot of the rent tenant protections that have passed in cities like Seattle. But let's just look at this practically speaking, okay? It's the argument of Representative Alvarado and other progressive Democrats that we have to do this. You have to do this, or else people are going to be forced out of their apartments, out of their homes that they're renting. They're going to fall into homelessness or whatever it is. So if you pass something like this and you say, let's cap the rent increases at 7% a year, what landlords are going to do, particularly landlords that don't have a ton of units, that aren't some sort of conglomerate, although I would imagine that the big landlords with the big buildings would do this as well, is they're looking for predictability unpredictability as well. They don't know where the market is going to go to year. They can try to guess, etc., but they're a business, right? They are in it for a profit of some kind. If you're a small landlord and you only have one rental unit, I don't think that you're going to go through all of that work of owning that property and everything just to break even. I mean, I don't think they're making money hand over fist, but they're the ones who absorbed the investment. They're the ones who bought the property. They're the ones who are responsible for maintaining it, for taxes and all of these things. And so to think that they're going to rent it at a loss, that's just absurd. That doesn't make any sense. So if you cap rent increases at 7% a year, what any landlord who understands the market is going to do is max it out every year, even if they don't need to. They are going to raise your rent 7% every single year, because what they're going to try to do is compensate for years where, hey, we need a larger increase and I can't do that. So now you have, if you want to give tenants predictability, Representative Alvarado, you've just done that. You have given every tenant in this state the predictability that their rents will go up 7% like clockwork every single year, because landlords are going to have no choice but to do that, because you're taking the predictability away from them. And then with Representative Alvarado, and again, this whole housing thing, God, what a boondoggle. What an absolute money suck example of government incompetence. You know, she said at the end of her remarks, I've heard from opponents who say, oh, we just need to wait until we build more housing and affordable housing and all of this. We can't wait. It's your party that has failed, though. It's your party that's been in power for 40 years in the governor's office, for 8 straight legislative sessions across the board, and it's your party that hasn't made any progress on increasing the availability of affordable housing. And in fact, we've seen a few bills just this legislative session that will make it more expensive for the building industry to build affordable housing. And you can't build affordable housing if it's not affordable to build. All of these regulations around heat pumps and, oh, we can't have natural gas and all of this that make it more expensive to build a home, and therefore price more people out of the dream of home ownership. You have regulatory delays. Every time you have a regulatory hurdle that a home builder has to jump over, you're adding time to the home construction. It adds cost to the home construction. And every $10,000 that those costs increase, you're pricing out more and more Washington families. So again, they say, oh, it's like they created a lack of housing and an affordable housing crisis so they could do things like this, so they could push and justify policies like this. So yeah, there's your, and I will say, I don't know the fate of this in the Senate. I think Democrats felt the pressure, from these special interest groups. Oh, they're saying that if we don't do this, it's against, Black and Indigenous people or whatever it is. They felt this pressure to, go through with the vote on the floor of the House. But remember, this didn't even pass in a Democrat-controlled Senate committee. And so I do know that there are some Democrats in the Senate who are not in support of this. I can't imagine that Senator Mark Mullet, who's a business owner, who understands basic economics and what's happening in the real estate market, is in support of this. So this might very well die in the Senate. But if you don't think that this is something that's going to continue to get brought up over and over and over again, we're just fooling ourselves. So they don't want to fix the underlying problems. God forbid we actually make it affordable to build housing in this state. God forbid that we do other things to reduce the cost of living for people. God forbid we do any of that. But let's do rent control, because that'll really please our base. Wild stuff.